My name is Trix Ingado. Let's take a look at what's making headlines. Of course, we shall be taking a look at the politics and the political dynamics that have unfolded over the weekend, and at the same time get you updated on what's making headlines internationally. And to kick us off is the Daily Monitor. Let's take a look at that paper and see what they're covering for us this morning. They say Orthodox Church Archbishop Jonah Lwanga is dead. Some unfortunate news for for the church in Uganda. The church early Sunday virtually held an intercessory prayer, also informing congregants that His Eminence Lwanga was hospitalized. Unfortunately, he did pass on. Also, they're telling us why Uganda is grieving over General Paul Lokech. In early 2000s, Ugandan troops had been cut off deep inside the vast territory of the DR Congo, and of course, he hatched a plan to extricate those soldiers. Also, how art is rallying Ugandans against COVID-19. The doors to theaters are still slammed shut, with performance of venues being no-go zones for the creative arts. Nonetheless, the arts still have something to offer to Ugandans, and of course, in this pandemic, they are playing their part. Also, Adeke and Alobo sororities pairs of blue-feathered FDC MPs, and in a video, Guinea Putschits say president captured and government dissolved. Army in the West African nation of Guinea said on Sunday that they had captured President Alpha Conde. Find out more about what's happening in West Africa by taking a look at the Daily Monitor. Of course, they also have news on what's happening in Uganda. And in Tanzania, the Citizen is giving us the latest on that particular story. Military coup in Guinea. President Conde has been arrested. Turmoil engulfed the impoverished West African nation of Guinea again on Sunday, as Army Putschits said they had captured the president and staged a coup, and the government insisted it was still in power. But as you can see in that particular picture, it doesn't look too promising. Also, from independent body to probe, independent body to probe Hamza incident, and this has to do with the terror attack near a French embassy in the capital, Dar es Salaam. Lawyers, rights groups and analysts have demanded formation of an independent commission to investigate the killing of 3 officers. Now, let's take a look at another paper and see what's making headlines. We have the Rwanda Today, bringing us the latest from Rwanda. Teachers opt to plow back profits, cement SACCO stability, and also mining fortunes looking up as prices rise in export markets. They're also telling us about the pandemic and how it's affecting Rwanda. Pandemic exposes PWDs to more abuse, insecurity and poverty. Also, further afield, Afghan brain drain complicates Taliban rule, and Kenya-Uganda locked in a new sugar trade dispute. Find out more by taking a look at the Rwanda Today. Let's take a look at the CNN and see what they're prioritizing this morning. On their front page, you're being told bodies in River Point to new killing spree. Now, the corpses are piling up in an East African river. Locals say they are a result of a new phase of ethnic cleansing. And of course, you can find out more about that. Which part of East Africa? The East African nation papers are not leading with this, but clearly the CNN has chosen to prioritize this particular story. Also, Brazil versus Argentina game suspended as 4 Argentinian players accused of breaking COVID travel protocols, and also advertised for sale in fake online auction. These Muslim women refused to let trolls win. Also, Taiwan's air defenses crumble against renewed Chinese military activity, and new insight into drone strike on ISIS-K. On this end, we have Melania Trump is uninterested in public political life. Of course, that's nothing new. She has been consistent on that. And also, Congress claims Taliban not allowing U.S. citizens to depart Mazar-e Sharif Airport. As China woos the Taliban, the Uyghurs in Afghanistan fear for their lives. And of course, there's more that's being covered in the papers. If you want to be updated on what's happening across the borders, take a look at those papers and get yourself updated. But speaking of headlines, we also have the Standard this morning, a split cabinet like no other. The president has openly deferred with his deputy and even asked him to quit government. Of course, this made headlines a few days ago. And with cabinet secretaries taking on the DP, it is not surprising the top decision-making body has not met for 6 months, of course, as you can see right there. And there are quotes from Fred Matiang'i, Interior Cabinet Secretary, and Keriako Tobiko, Environmental Cabinet Secretary. On one end, Keriako says, if you cannot respect the president, then you do not deserve to be respected anymore. In fact, the DP is a clerk of the president, while Fred Matiang'i's Interior Cabinet Secretary says rather than subvert government system and efforts from within, the honorable thing would be for him to resign and openly join the opposition. That is what they're leading with on both on the Standard. But of course, the Daily Nation this morning is also dealing with a similar story, but they're terming it the shame of the Uhuru men in a church fight, and that is on the front page as well, and the pictures speak for themselves on that particular front. Now, this morning I am joined with panelists that are going to help me take a look at the dailies and of course talk about some of the top stories that are making headlines this morning. Now, with me is Michael Agwanda, who's a political analyst, Gloria Oroba, who's a youth policy analyst, as well as Kevin Osido, who's a governance expert. Kasim Tandaza is Matungu MP NC is going to join us via Zoom. Now, thank you so much for joining us this morning, first of all, to my guests.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, let's start off with the Standard this morning. A split cabinet like no other. They have not met for 6 months. I'd like to start off with you, Gloria. What do you make of this? And of course, is this unexpected? Well, we would hope that administrative issues are not, influenced by the political dynamics of the day. But of course, that's not what's happening according to the Standard. What is your take?
You know, I think what is so apparent is that we have too many appointed cabinet secretaries who are aiming or angling for political seats. So, and 10 months, we're about 10, 11 months to the next general election. So yes. I think it's becoming more difficult for them to actually, observe political obscurity.
It's just inevitable.
So I mean, when you hear the utterances of the likes of Joe Musheru, the Minister of ICT and Youth, and coming out strongly against a certain political divide,
right.
And we've had severally Matiang'i actually also as well coming out strongly, and sometimes you wonder then how can we, as much as we're looking to making these amendments, the BBI and things like that, these are some of the issues that we need to look into. How do you ensure that you have that executive, the cabinet secretary, is actually just focusing on their jobs as appointed civil servants? So I think, unfortunately, we might see a cabinet reshuffle, but it's not going to be for the better.
Yeah.
I think it's actually going to be basically those who are strong allies of the president. And I won't even be surprised that by February next year, when we have what we call now the political transfer window, where now elected leaders will be allowed to move from the current political parties that they are in into their preferred choices, we'll still see another cabinet reshuffle because, of course, there will be some sort of realignment that needs to be done.
Yeah.
But what is unfortunate is that we are not having cabinet reshuffles so that we can actually push the Big Four agenda or Vision 2030 or some sort of legacy. It's really just being used as a political tool for the 2022 succession politics, and that's the sad thing about this.
Yeah. Mr. Agwanda, is it unrealistic to expect that the cabinet would be untouched by the current political atmosphere?
Good morning, Trix.
Good morning.
One thing that I want to say about the cabinet split is, especially that is being, at the front line of the Standard, is that I think the cabinet reshuffle, as you've asked, is long overdue. It's long overdue, and the question that everybody is asking is, why is President Uhuru Kenyatta so afraid of touching his cabinet?
Yeah.
Are they serving him so well? And if they're not serving him so well, why hasn't he dared touch the cabinet? Remember that the cabinet reshuffle is not a discussion that we are seeing today. This is something that we've been actually played to in the last 4 years. In fact, since the relationship between the president and the deputy president got a little bit sour, we knew that the cabinet would be reshuffled, simply because the president had his way in choosing his cabinet. But we also know for a fact that the deputy president also came with his cabinet. But when this relationship went a little bit sour, people thought that the first reshuffle that will take place were people that were chosen as a cabinet secretaries aligned to the deputy president.
Right.
That has not happened.
Right.
If that has not happened, then the question, therefore, that Kenyans will be asking is the president happy with the performance of the cabinet ministers that were brought about by the deputy president? Now, if he's not happy with them, then why hasn't he changed them? But I don't think that anybody should be changed or removed from the cabinet for a mere fact that he's supporting a certain politician. I really don't think that will be the issue. The issue to me will be there are ministries in this country that perhaps are performing below par, and those are certain ministries that need to be looked into. We also know that there are also cabinet ministers that have also gone political, and those should be the firm grounds under which these cabinet ministers need to be pushed, because if you are supporting a certain politician and not the interests of the government and the president that is serving at the moment, then there is no reason why you need to be serving in that cabinet. If anything, you should not be waiting that you need to be fired, or you need to have actually excused yourself so that you can pursue a political agenda. The third one is the cabinet ministers that have actually gone public and have said that come 2022, August, I am going to run for a certain position. Most of them are actually thinking of running for governor. We know that Dr. Matiang'i is angling and thinking that he should be running for president in this country. Now, those individuals should be removed on the basis of the fact that they have other interests that will not enable them to perform their duties as cabinet ministers today. And for that reason, they need to go home. And for that reason, the president need not to wait any longer, because 1 year in politics is huge. The president is still left with about 11 months. Those 11 months, if he still wants to do something for this country, he can do something that we can remember. But if he's having some ministers that are lethargic, some ministers that are divided in opinion, some ministers that are divided in loyalty, some ministers that are divided in roles and responsibilities, then he will not be able to achieve anything in this 1 year that we have.
Okay. Now, actually, your last point, Bri, is what I was thinking about. Is it in order that they still be in power or holding office with their political ambitions? And political ambitions aside, they are actually actively partaking in some of the political utterances of the day, like I on Fred Matiang'i here saying, rather than subvert government system and efforts from within, the honorable thing would be for him to resign and openly join the opposition. That is, he's talking about the deputy president. And of course, given his here, one would, wouldn't one say, Mr. Osido, that he can actually also, he should actually also resign and then just openly get into politics and do it the traditional way, as opposed to while still in such a very critical ministry?
Trix, if you look at what is happening with President Uhuru Kenyatta's cabinet, in my view, it is not new. And from 2005, after the PNU defeated constitutional clamor, President Kibaki fired his entire cabinet and later on appointed them with his own loyalists. And the kind of gusto that therefore came from those individuals, ladies and gentlemen, who are appointed by the president, is evident up to today, even as we speak, that they came up and were able to pick the country and they moved on to deliver to the citizens of the Republic of Kenya. The deputy president himself has suffered such a casualty when he was fired by the former Prime Minister, Right Honorable Raila Odinga, as a Minister of Agriculture in 2011. And these are purely because of many things, including issues to do with corruption and the accusations that were then meted on the then minister over issues of maize from Brazil, among others. When we see people speaking like this, And President Kenyatta finds himself, in my view, in such a very difficult corner because he is an outgoing president. And he's seated around men and women who have declared their interest to run for office, including the super, quote-unquote, super CS that we are talking about, Mheshimiwa Dr. Fred Matiang'i. What needs to happen, therefore, is for us to underscore the essence of a transition. Because if President Uhuru was running again as a president incumbent, we would not be seeing these kind of issues. People would be as loyal, people would be as very clear and categorical to want to deliver on behalf of the citizens of Kenya. But this is happening because you also have a very agile deputy who has declared interest in running for office. And so people want to galvanize around this power that has been that is being organized to take over from this transition of the President Uhuru Kenyatta. So Mheshimiwa Matiang'i, therefore, finds himself in such a corner, and he says that, yes, I have been touted by the President as a super CS, and so I am supposed to be in charge. And if you look at how the cabinet has been managing itself even lately, the CS Matiang'i leads a team of a small committee of the cabinet that meets every Tuesday.
Yeah.
And this, therefore, is a team that is really in charge with the daily running and coordination of the cabinet, which is really the essence of how the cabinet, in the mind and the wisdom of the president, he thinks that he wants to overcome all these challenges that he has with him. It will be quite interesting, therefore, to see how President Uhuru Kenyatta hands over this cabinet to the next president who the people of Kenya will vote and the person that God wants to lead them. And so for people...
And if it would be the deputy president, it would be quite awkward because he has been engaged in a war of words with the cabinet secretaries, with some having hit out at him quite openly. I'd like to bring in Kasim Tandaza, who's Matungu Member of Parliament, ANC Deputy Party Leader, who's joining us via Zoom to also weigh in on this. Surely it's been 6 months since the cabinet met for obvious reasons, or rather, given the assertion of this article, it's because of some of the political undertones that are currently at play. Mheshimiwa, what do you make of this, and is it in order in your view?
Thank you, Trix, and our viewers. First and foremost, I think we need to start from what the law says. Yes. About the cabinet,
yes,
the political angle to the cabinet, and the expectations of Kenyans. The 2010 Constitution came up with a cabinet of technocrats, cabinets who are from outside Parliament. So the assumption was that these will be technocrats devoid of political inclination.
Absolutely.
Did that happen? No. People assumed that that was the case. Now that you are picking cabinet secretaries from outside Parliament, that they will not be political, but that never happened. We saw politicians again being appointed to those cabinet with those positions. Two, we were also expecting, there were expectations out there that there would even be academic qualifications. We were thinking that one, to be a cabinet secretary, we will need a degree, a proven degree for that matter. Did that happen? No. We ended up with cabinet secretaries who dropped in secondary, dropped in primary, and they were there. Well, whether you are to ask me whether they performed or not, performance, I would say, is not purely gauged on papers. But we thought, I think generally Kenyans thought that this time the technocrats will be people who are having proven record in management of organizations and therefore management of those positions. That did happen. Now, way forward, we are talking of 6 months. The cabinet has not met. Now, can we go to the law? What does the law specify as the bare minimum? Is there some regulation that it must meet within this duration? The expectation of the Kenyans, I believe, me included, was at least it meets once every month. But if you go to the law, there is no such specification that the cabinet must meet. That means it will only meet at the whims of the president, so to speak. So if we decide that he has a cabinet which he thinks he doesn't have to meet, then that's the case. Otherwise, people would have gone to court or will be seeking redress on why the cabinet has not met for this period of time.
Right.
Now, the reason it's not meeting, I think it's not more of a performance, but more of the political angle, especially the succession politics, which is now ongoing. I'm sure, just as the ruling party, Jubilee, which basically picked those cabinet secretaries, cannot have a PG, a parliamentary group meeting as a party for as long as you can remember. I can't remember the last time they had their PG. It is the same thing that is now bedeviling the cabinet, that they cannot not meet because they are quite sure some nasty things. They are not going to actually come to any common ground.
Yeah.
So what happens is, with the Jubilee Party, they have something called the NMSC, the Management Committee, of a few people. They meet, they decide, they try to carry that out. And in the cabinet, the same thing now. They have a few cabinet secretaries, the so-called loyalists. They meet and decide. But to me, will that really affect the performance of the cabinet secretaries? I don't think it would if the cabinet secretaries were picked on merit. They know what they're supposed to do because we give them budget.
Okay.
You know, the work of the cabinet secretary is execution. It is the executive arm of the government.
Right.
The moment a cabinet secretary is allocated some funds to perform with some specific duties, he should perform beside the politicking. He can as well politic and still perform. If they are to drill a borehole, if they are to do a road, and the tendering is done, and the work is given out, and the funds is there, the contractor is there. The contractor, and with the timeline, that project should be done, irrespective of whether that cabinet secretary is performing. Remember, the cabinet secretary essentially is on matters of policy, not on matters. We have the person, the principal secretary, that is actually the IA holder. So here, I think the problem we are having is that Kenyans, we like politicking, we politic 24 hours a day, and the Kenyans themselves like it that way. But we should also thank God that this is a country where politicking can go on, and still the government could still run, the economy can still run, irrespective of the other issues which are bedeviling this country, that is matters of corruption, not really matters of politics.
Okay.
That's how we look at it.
Okay, and on page 12, we have a similar story whereby we're told Interior Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i has been asked not to allow political influence to sway him in his work. Now, we have Kuria West Member of Parliament Mathias Robi claiming that the CS has allowed himself to be used by politicians to misuse his documents. When the appropriateness of it all, then that comes into question, because on one end, they're technocrats, and it was it's their experience that would actually influence how they work. But at the same time, there are these claims. What do you make?
I think, you can't say that we are just going to politic and we are not going to. I mean, politics, literally everything that runs in government is politics, because at the end of the day, what the CSs are implementing are policies that came up from political ideologies. At the end of the day, what the cabinet secretaries are actually pushing, for instance, now the Big Four agenda is actually an ideology that was picked up from a political party and that decided, so, we can't say that we like to politic a lot, and so, that means that we are not working. The difference is, I think we have to find a way, and when I say we, I'm thinking literally the National Assembly, by way of legislating something where we can actually hold these cabinet secretaries and appointees, particularly also of those ones of state agencies, that they actually have to sort of refrain from engaging in now what I'd say active politics in terms of supporting one side of a political divide. So there has to be a way that we can legislate it. There has to be a way where if you cross the line, for instance, when we were questioning why the Deputy President's security was switched, there has to be a guideline by which we can say, okay, at this point, this employee, this appointed person who's supposed to act on behalf of the government to actually represent all Kenyans, whether from which side of the political divide, has actually gone the wrong way. So for me, I think these are some of the amendments that we should be looking into, because if we are going to make government efficient, it has to be that the people who are appointed to execute the policies, to execute the agendas of the government, at hand, that they have to literally have some sort of end game, some goal. It's unfortunate, though, that I'm sure when it comes to legislature that, touches on how the executive or arms of the executive are supposed to behave, it's unfortunate that I am sure if there's any bill that will be tabled to that extent in the National Assembly, I'm pretty sure, because again of the political allegiances that the members of parliament have towards either the executive or otherwise, it will be a difficult bill to pass. But the way I see it, you can be a technocrat, but you are influenced in terms of politics. All these appoint the cabinet secretaries. They're qualified, in terms of technical skills. They are qualified in terms of experience, and yet we still see the likes of Joe Musheru going out and deciding to choose a certain political divide. So it's not that they are not qualified. It's just that they have chosen, and because we don't have any laws that can guide us or that can guide the executive on where he has to let go of a cabinet secretary. Someone who declares that they are going to run for office in the next general election, that by itself should be very clear that they ought to be taken out of the cabinet.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think we need some piece of legislature that can, guide these appointees.
Yeah, and the picture painting right there is one of very blurred lines. Mr. Gwanda, what do you make of that? Because this article says the planned reorganization on Friday, partly informed by doubts over loyalty, would not be unique to Uhuru's administration. Ruto, for instance, is a casualty of such a move, having been sacked as a minister by Raila in 2011. So as Honorable Tanzaza said, this is nothing new, or was it Mr. Osido? But at the same time, so where do we draw the line?
This is something that is very unique in this country, that even if you're a cabinet minister and you're caught with your hands in the cookie, you still wait to be fired.
Yeah.
Even if you're a cabinet minister and you know very well that you have other interests, you still want to be fired so that you can use that quote unquote, they fired me because for political reasons.
Yeah.
Even if some of them have looted the money from government, and I'm not afraid to cite the former Minister of Finance that is battling court cases now in court. Kenyans called for his resignation to a point where the international community had to wage in and say, this is just practically impossible to work with a country like this that cannot even listen to the cry of its citizenry. Finally, he was let go. He was actually suspended. He was not even fired. But he was waiting to be fired so that he could go back to his community and say, I've just been fired, but I've been very good to you. What is wrong with us Kenyans that we cannot just honorably say, I want to go home, I have some loyalty issue with my boss, and for that reason, I cannot continue sitting here drawing money that belongs to Kenyans, pretending that I'm working while I am politically inclined to a certain individual. This has to stop. In honor and integrity, people have to know that if you're serving in a government like this, you are serving at the behest of the president, in the interest of the president. If the president failed, he did not fail alone. He failed with you. But there are definitely ministers that are out there that are today not seeing eye to eye with the president simply because the president has also given them a field day. They don't have no cabinet meetings, and for that reason, they can hide wherever they are as much as they can. One reason that I will say is the main reason why some of these cabinet ministers are still sitting in their, comfy chairs is because they still want to loot until the last minute. And for that reason, they would rather just continue, even if they're doing nothing, they would rather continue looting until the last minute, so that when the last minute comes and somebody decides that they have to go home, they'll have looted as much as they can, unfortunately.
Why is the president firing them?
I think you'll get a point. You'll get your chance to do that. You'll get your chance to do that. But what I am saying is it's very, very clear. the question that everybody is asking is, why can't the president make a decision once and for all and fire these people?
Now, let me respond to that
with
with a part of this article that would actually maybe bring more insight into that question that you're asking, Mr. Agwanda. Last Friday at 10 a.m. meeting at Harambee House that would have broken the cabinet's 6-month hiatus flopped. Sources told The Standard that Uhuru had planned to reshuffle the cabinet after the meeting, kicking out those with political ambitions and others affiliated to the deputy president. But the president reportedly caved in after intense lobbying from a section of cabinet and intelligence brief. For a long time, there has been speculation of a cabinet reshuffle, sparking anxiety among those likely to be replaced by allies of opposition leaders. Now, Mr. Osido, could you comment in on that and also, you know, comment on the question of why the president would not?
What we see happening out there against what is actually happening are two totally different things. One, look at the way cabinet secretaries are appointed in this country.
Right.
You must have contributed something. You must have sacrificed something to warrant being nominated, vetted by Parliament, and then appointed by His Excellency the President. Even in the ongoing political alliances and coalition building processes, that is purely the basics. Number two, so beyond looking at what your contribution and sacrifice is as an individual, you go into national image, where you look at which ethnic group, which community has the highest numbers, and why would they actually warrant sitting in the cabinet. And so the president and what you're calling intelligence brief is purely based on that, from knowledge and from what I think is going on with NIS and the president's handlers. They're asking themselves, so if we replace, for instance, Mheshimiwa Matiang'i, who else from Kisii region? You know, there could be several other people from that particular region and the wider region of Nyanza. But the question is, what has that person, say, Trix Ngado, contributed to the Jubilee government of 2013 and 2017. The people who have been asked to leave are people who have actually had a lot of public outcry with express heavy intelligence on corruption and how citizens have a feeling that they are actually not adding any salt to the kind of food which they are taking on their, from their tables in the aspect of service delivery. But even as my friend Agwanda was saying, they are just hanging around. They have not been fired. They have never been sent home. In fact, they are still on half salaries, and they are getting their salaries and monies from taxpayers. So the president and the people who manage reshuffles and all these changes are privy to all these issues. And then the last thing, which is the third point, is really how do we manage transition? Because remember that the president is still vested in his transition, vested at two levels. One, that he wants to be able to stamp up a legacy. But then number two, he's also more or less like the hidden arm that is trying to coordinate who he wants to take over from him and who he does not want to take over from him. And that is going to also present a backlash, that in the sense that you bring in people that citizens don't think that are representing them, then the aspect of numbers, when ultimately IEBC does what is called voted, casted, and counted, and then they announce the president, that region might be probably thinking, this gentleman doesn't like us. You know, it is only 10 months to an election and is sending away the people that we probably think are the best. Yes, they are stealing, but as we say, they are stealing on our behalf. They are our thieves, because some of those stolen crumbs are actually falling from the tables and we are eating them. So the president is much more keen to look at how this also plays into his transition and how he's able to hold a grip on the cabinet to be able to pass on this cabinet to what I was saying earlier on, the person that he thinks needs to run over this country when the people of Kenya vote and if God chooses that particular individual. And so a lot of things would have led to that particular process. Of course, looking also at how people are angling themselves, tricks, who wants to run. We have almost 8 cabinet secretaries who have declared that they want to run for, for government in the next phase. And so the question is, how do you play around all these issues and still ensure that you hold your grip to the cabinet and ensure service delivery to the citizens of Kenya.
Right. Mheshimiwa Tandaza, what's coming out of this conversation and also what's being put in the paper this morning on page 4 is that it is a delicate balancing act and so many things actually influence who is in cabinet. While you, as you pointed out earlier on, these are meant to be technocrats and bringing in their expertise, we cannot extricate the influence of politics on how these appointments are done on, and even the possibility of a cabinet reshuffle. Now, what do you make of that question? Why won't the president, just get rid of some of these CSs, and at the same time, the time factor and how the fact that he is now faced with the handover is playing into the possibilities of who shall be in cabinet by Friday?
Well, Trix, to me, the issue is very simple to answer that question.
Yeah.
That the president right now is more interested in the succession politics than in what he calls the Big Four agenda.
Okay.
In fact, now, if there is a legacy we would want to actually leave Kenyans, from where I sit, it's more of the succession politics than of his four main agenda of reviving the economy and whatever. Look at it this way. These are politicians right from the beginning, as I was said. There are some of them who are picked from the political angle, and this should have not been the case. The general perception of the Kenyan with the 2010 constitution is that they would have a cabinet strictly based on track performance from where they have been. They would have picked somebody from, if it's Treasury, from probably the World Bank, the Kenyans working there, or whatever. If it was matters of sport, they will pick somebody who is also an expert in that field. If it's education, okay, we have Magoha now who is in education, but remember previously we had Amina who has never been in any education. So that is the problem right from the beginning. And where we are now, we are having that problem of succession. If the president was interested in execution of government projects and having the government run for the common mwananchi, he would have fired almost all the cabinet secretaries based on their corruption record. There is no cabinet secretary right now, probably a few. I will probably talk of Adan Mohammed and I don't know, who've not been mentioned in any scandal. But all the others have goofed in one way or another. And to me, since I'm very passionate, I've always said, what ails this country? Apart from our ethnic angle when it comes to picking our leaders, the other issue is the issue of corruption, which is actually killing everybody. It's killing the economy and therefore killing the Kenyans. The president has not been able to to show willingness to actually fight this vice. At one point, you would wonder, would he also be benefiting then from this? Because from where I sit, if I have my private organization, I'm like in a country with the president, just the way I would run my company, and I'm the CEO there, and I have an employee who is stealing from that organization.
Yes.
I wouldn't think twice. I wouldn't think twice whether he's from my tribe or because it's going to bring this organization down. And when the organization goes down, it goes down with me. But in Kenya, that is not the case. The issue of those cabinet secretaries allied to the deputy president who are probably now politicking and they are actually their loyalty somewhere else, it reaches a point where we'll actually even ask, is it true that there is a rift between the president and his deputy? Because if that rift was real, then he wouldn't have any problem because he would be like punishing them and ultimately punishing the deputy president, whatever the consequence. But you can see they are still there. For whatever reason, they know best. So sometimes I would even think probably there are things which are out there playing in the gallery, but beneath it, there are some other MOUs which are going on which Kenyans are not privy to, and a person like me is not privy to.
Right.
But by and large, the unfortunate bit is that the government not functioning, the CSS probably not having the proper coordination, some CSS feeling that they are not part of the government, they are just having, certainly that affect their performance and affect their the deliverables which the Kenyans expect. And yet, from where I sit, we've allocated taxpayers' money to these different ministries, which should be used for the betterment of the Mwananchi. And if, for some reasons, the politics come in and they cannot perform, then it's the common Mwananchi who suffer. And that is where the president now will have come in and say, well, the common Mwananchi, the person I saw the constitution to serve, is the primary subject of my being the president. Can everything else stop and stand aside and have a performing cabinet? And therefore, we have this delivery. But for sure, it is unfortunate from where we are. We cannot legislate. Gloria talked about legislation, and I'm sure I know that he has a parliamentarian on this panel. But for sure, we cannot legislate everything. You know, when it comes to the president and the deputy, it's like probably a husband and a wife. You've been given a marriage certificate. You're in your house. You don't expect the marriage counselor or the court now to come and say, you should be cooking at this time, you should be sleeping at this time, in your bed, one should be on this. You cannot legislate anything. It reaches a point where somebody just has to act out of the conscience for the betterment of the country, for this matter, if we are talking about the president. Otherwise, if we are to legislate, like now, the cabinet secretaries who have just mentioned that they're going to run for office, they will simply keep quiet, but they will still be handling for those political cause. They will still be doing it underground. Will it be any different? No, because they will still be appearing not to be political, but at the same time, they are down there sitting, their systems working, probably even diverting more amount of some cash from their budget for their political reasons. So to me, I think it reaches a point where one has to work with a clear conscience of the common Mwananchi and work with some decorum, some ethics inborn from that person that, well, I have this responsibility, I have to perform it, and if for some reason I think I cannot perform for the betterment of the country, let me resign. But in Kenya, you remember, we don't have any history of resigning. We have this famous quote, I would rather die than resign.